The village had never been this quiet before. The silence was almost heavy, like a thick blanket draped over everything. I could hear the wind rustling through the leaves, the distant call of a bird, and sometimes, if I listened closely enough, the creaking of old wood from the houses that had been left behind. Hogunawa used to be full of life. Children running through the streets, farmers calling out to each other in the fields, the laughter of friends and neighbours. But that was a long time ago, before everyone started leaving. I can still remember the day when the first family packed up and left. They were good people, the Yamamotos. Their eldest son had found a job in the city, and it wasn't long before the rest of the family followed. They said they'd come back to visit, but they never did. One by one, the others followed. The Ogawas, the Fujimotos, the Tanakas. Soon, there were more empty houses than there were people. Now, it was just me and a handful of others. Old folks, mostly. Too stubborn or too attached to leave. Every day, I watched as the village I loved slowly crumbled, falling into disrepair as nature crept back in. The roof of the schoolhouse had collapsed last winter, and the shrine at the edge of the village had been overtaken by weeds. It broke my heart to see it, but what could I do? I was just one old woman, living alone in a house that was too big for me. But I couldn't give up on Hogunawa. I wouldn't. This village was my home, the place where I had raised my children, where I had spent my entire life. I had to do something, anything, to bring it back to life. It started as a small thought, just a tiny flicker of hope in the back of my mind. What if I could bring people back to the village? What if, somehow, I could make them see what a wonderful place this was? Get them to return and rebuild what had been lost? I wasn't sure how, but the idea took root, growing stronger with each passing day. I began by tending to my garden. It was something I could do with my own two hands, something that brought me peace. The soil here was rich and fertile, and the vegetables grew strong and healthy. The flowers, too, they bloomed in every color, brightening up the yard. I took pride in my garden, and soon, it became a small oasis in the middle of the quiet village. I wondered if it could be the beginning of something bigger. One evening, as I sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching the sun dip behind the mountains, I thought about the village as it used to be. I could almost hear the voices, the laughter, the sounds of life, and I began to wish, with all my heart, for those days to return. I closed my eyes and pictured it in my mind. Families returning, children playing in the streets, the fields full of crops once more. I imagined it so clearly that it felt almost real. I had heard of people manifesting their desires, making their dreams come true through sheer willpower and belief. I didn't know if I believed in such things, but what harm was there in trying? I had nothing to lose. Every night, before I went to bed, I would close my eyes and imagine the village coming back to life. I pictured the houses being repaired, the fields being tilled, the schoolhouse filled with children once more. I held on to that image, hoping against hope that it would somehow come true. Weeks passed, then months. At first, nothing changed. The village remained as quiet and empty as ever. But I didn't stop. Every day, I worked in my garden, and every night, I wished for the village to be reborn. Then, one day, something happened. I was out in the garden, pulling weeds, when I heard a car coming up the road. It was such a rare sound that I stopped what I was doing and looked up, shading my eyes against the sun. A small old car was making its way toward the village, kicking up dust as it went. I watched as it rolled to a stop in front of one of the abandoned houses. A young couple got out, looking around with interest. They were dressed in casual clothes, the kind that city folks wear when they're on vacation. The woman had a camera slung around her neck, and she began taking pictures of the house. The man walked up to the door and tried the handle, but of course, it was locked. "Hello," I called out, waving at them. They turned, surprised to see me, but they smiled and walked over. I introduced myself, and they told me their names, Aya and Kenji. They were from the city, they said, and they had heard about the village from a friend who used to live here. They were curious and decided to take a look. We talked for a while, and I could see that they were taken with the place. They asked about the other houses, about the history of the village, and I told them everything I knew. They stayed for tea, and as we sat on the porch, I could see the wheels turning in their minds. They were thinking about it, I could tell. A few weeks later, they came back. This time, they brought a truck with them, full of boxes and furniture. They had decided to move in, they told me, to fix up one of the old houses and make it their own. I couldn't believe it. I had hoped, but I hadn't really expected it to happen. But there they were, full of energy and plans for the future. After Aya and Kenji moved in, something seemed to shift in the air. It was as if their presence breathed new life into the village. And soon, others began to arrive. First, it was another young couple, then a family with 2 small children. They were all looking for something different, something quieter, away from the hustle and bustle of the city. And they found it here, in Hoshikawa. The village started to come back to life, little by little. The houses were repaired, the fields were tilled, and the schoolhouse, after so many years of silence, echoed with the laughter of children once more. It was like a dream come true. As the seasons changed, so did the village. More and more people arrived, drawn by the beauty of the place and the promise of a different kind of life. They brought with them new ideas, new energy, and together, we began to rebuild what had been lost. The streets were no longer empty, the air no longer heavy with silence. The village was alive again, and so was I. Looking back, I can hardly believe how much has changed. Hoshikawa is thriving once more, a place of community and connection, where people look out for each other and work together. And it all started with a wish, a hope, a belief that things could be different. I don't know if I truly manifested it, or if it was just luck, or perhaps a combination of both. But I do know that I never gave up on this village, and in the end, it didn't give up on me. Now, as I sit on the porch in the evenings, watching the sun dip behind the mountains, I can hear the sounds of life all around me. The laughter of children, the calls of the farmers in the fields, the chatter of neighbors as they pass by. It's a sound that fills my heart with joy, a reminder that sometimes, when you believe in something with all your heart, it really can come true. And as I look out over the village, I can't help but smile. Hoshikawa is home again, not just for me, but for all of us. And I know that, no matter what, it always will be. The days began to blur together in a rhythm that felt like the beating heart of Hoshikawa. It wasn't just that the village was alive again, it was thriving in ways I hadn't dared to imagine. I would wake up each morning to the sound of roosters crowing, children laughing as they ran down the dirt roads, and the hum of life that filled the air. The old houses, once empty and forlorn, now had smoke curling from their chimneys, the scent of miso soup and grilled fish wafting through the air. I couldn't have asked for more. But it was in the little things, the details that once seemed so insignificant, where I found the most profound sense of satisfaction. The small vegetable garden I had started as a way to pass the time had now expanded into a thriving community plot. Every morning, I'd find neighbors, new and old, tending to their rows, sharing tips on growing the best daikon or the sweetest tomatoes. The pride we took in our collective harvests was immense, and on weekends, we'd gather in the old town square for markets, selling our produce to each other and to the few travelers who passed through. I made it a point to visit every new family that settled in Hoshikawa. There were the Matsudas, a family of 4 who had left Tokyo behind after the father, Daisuke, grew tired of the corporate grind. They moved into the house next to mine, and I often heard their children, Haru and Aiko, playing outside. Their laughter was infectious, reminding me of when my own children were young. Daisuke's wife, Imiko, took to village life as if she had been born to it. She often came over to share recipes with me, bringing along the latest concoction she had tried. Then there was Hiroshi, a solitary man in his late 40s who had lost his wife to illness. He found solace in the peace of Hoshikawa, in the mountains that framed the village and the river that sang its way through the valley. We struck up an unlikely friendship, sharing stories of our lives over cups of tea on my porch. He was quiet, introspective, but he had a warmth that made me feel as if we had known each other for years. Every evening, I would sit on my porch and watch the village settle into the night. The lanterns that lined the streets glowed softly, casting a warm light over the homes that were once dark and empty. I would sip my tea, feeling a deep sense of contentment that I had never known before. It was as if all the years of loneliness, of watching Hoshikawa slowly wither away, had been worth it for this moment, for the chance to see it flourish again. But even as the village thrived, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was still more to be done. Hoshikawa had been reborn, but there were still so many abandoned homes, so many spaces that needed to be filled. I found myself wishing, once again, for more. More families, more life, more laughter. I couldn't stop myself. I didn't want to. I knew deep down that this was just the beginning. One day, as I was walking through the village, I noticed a young woman standing in front of one of the abandoned houses. She was holding a small child in her arms, her face etched with worry. I approached her, introducing myself, and learned that her name was Yuki. She had been traveling with her daughter Hana after leaving an abusive relationship. She had no place to go, no family to turn to, and had ended up in Hoshikawa by sheer chance. Without hesitation, I offered her a place to stay. The house next to mine had been empty for years, but it was still in good condition. Together, with the help of some neighbors, we cleaned it up, repaired what needed fixing, and within a week, Yuki and Hana had a home. It was the least I could do, and as I watched Yuki settle into the village, finding her own rhythm in this new life, I felt that familiar sense of fulfillment. It wasn't long before others began to arrive. Hoshikawa had become a refuge, a place where people could start over. There were the Morris, a couple who had lost everything in a fire and were looking for a fresh start. They brought with them a small, scrappy dog that the children in the village quickly adopted as their own. There was Akiko, a retired teacher who wanted nothing more than to spend her days writing poetry and tending to a small flower garden. And there was Kenta, a young man who had been lost, drifting from job to job in the city, until he found his way to Hoshikawa. With each new arrival, the village grew stronger, more vibrant. The empty spaces were filled with life, the streets echoed with the sounds of community, and Hoshikawa, once forgotten, had become a place of hope and renewal. It wasn't always easy, of course. There were challenges, moments of doubt, times when it seemed like the old ways would come back to haunt us. But we faced them together, as a community, and each time, we emerged stronger. I never stopped manifesting, never stopped wishing for the village to continue growing. And with each passing day, my wishes seemed to come true. Hoshikawa became a place where people came not just to escape, but to build something new, something lasting. As I sit here now, writing this down, I can hear the sounds of the village outside my window. The voices of children playing, the low hum of conversation, the rustling of leaves in the breeze. It's a symphony of life, one that I will never tire of hearing. Hoshikawa has become more than just a village. It's a symbol of what can happen when you refuse to give up, when you hold on to hope even in the darkest of times. It's a testament to the power of community, of belief, and of the simple truth that sometimes the most extraordinary things happen in the most ordinary of places. And as long as I'm here, I'll keep wishing, keep manifesting, and keep believing that Hoshikawa will continue to thrive long after I'm gone. Because this village, this home, is worth it. It always has been, and it always will be.